Caleb Morris had always loved bone marrow. Not the casual kind of love people have for pizza or holiday brisket. For Caleb, it was an artistic obsession, the kind that got him into his first professional kitchen, made him drop out of college, and pushed him to spend nearly a decade chasing the rich. Silky essence that melted between bone and flame. When tallow and fire at the restaurant he worked at shut down due to bankruptcy after the pandemic, Caleb found himself drifting in a bottomless void. He slept in a cramped apartment in Queens, cooked only for himself, but nothing stirred his palate. Supermarket marrow bones, butcher shop veal femurs, even imported Japanese cuts, all of them lacked soul, missing something primal, feral, something he couldn't name. One night, while cleaning out the dusty test kitchen he rented for freelance gigs, Caleb found a jet black business card, no address, no phone number, just 3 words, etched in silver, the Marrow Pit, and beneath it, "You're ready? Midnight. Alone." He stared at the card for minutes, heart pounding like a war drum. He'd never heard of that name in chef circles. Not on the internet. Not in any underground culinary forums. But it echoed in his mind like a dangerous promise. That night, he didn't sleep. He imagined the crackle of marrow fat on cast iron, the hiss of bone sizzling, the velvet texture melting on his tongue like a spiritual drug, a secret place only for those who were ready. What could possibly be waiting behind that door? One day passed, then 2. Caleb couldn't stop thinking about it. He started digging on Reddit, underground chef groups, even the dark web, but every lead ended in silence. Then, on the 3rd evening, an anonymous message lit up his phone. Marrow Pit, 120 Wexley Avenue, 11:59 p.m. Come hungry. No follow-up, no directions, no explanation. Caleb stared at the glowing screen. He didn't reply. He just grabbed his jacket, packed his favorite chef's knife, and headed out. What he didn't know was this. Behind the door of the Marrow Pit, there wasn't just marrow. There was a truth no human palate was ever meant to taste. I arrived at 120 Wexley Avenue, right on time. Not early, not late. The street was nearly pitch black. The building looked like an abandoned warehouse, faded grey brick, a heavy steel door, and no signage. No people, no cars. Just a faint trail of smoke drifting in the breeze, and a strange sensation like someone was waiting behind that door. I knocked 3 times, purely on instinct. No answer. But then the door creaked open, slowly and silently, in a way that made my skin crawl. I stepped inside. The interior was a stark contrast to the crumbling exterior. Dim, amber lighting like candle glow. Old wooden walls polished to a soft sheen. Long tables spaced far apart. At each one sat a single white plate and a glass of deep, blood-red wine. No music, just a soft murmur from the kitchen. And somewhere deeper, the click of a bone saw. Mr. Morris, a tall man, emerged from behind a black steel bar. He wore a dark brown leather apron, his silver hair shaved close. Eyes sharp and cutting as, if they could see through you. "I'm Chef Eli Warden. Welcome to the Marrow Pit." I nodded, trying to steady myself. Something in his voice made me feel, not like a guest, but like part of a ritual. "Tonight," Eli said, "you'll experience 6 courses. No menu, no choices, just taste." The first course arrived without explanation. A roasted beef bone, charred over hickory wood, its marrow bubbling softly like melting beeswax. I dipped in a small spoonful and tasted it. I'd eaten dozens of marrow dishes in my life, but nothing like this. It was silky, warm, with a subtle sweetness, almost like ripe fruit, but deeper, almost familiar. I looked up. Eli was watching me. He smiled. Umami is memory, he said. Hit the right depth, and it brings back things long buried. I swallowed part in agreement, part because something in me couldn't stop. The courses kept coming. A tart glazed with rendered marrow fat. A bowl of bone porridge slow-simmered for 36 hours. Its aroma tinged with chestnut. Each dish was refined, seductive, and deeply, disturbingly wrong in a way I couldn't yet explain. At the next table, a woman ate slowly. Her hands trembled, her eyes glassy like someone who hadn't slept in days. I glanced around. No one spoke. No one smiled. They just ate as if stopping would somehow let the silence consume them. Course 5 Illy brought it out himself. A small bone, very small, cleanly sawed in half and served on a silver plate. I stared at it. It wasn't from a cow, not veal, not from any animal I recognized. My heartbeat quickened. A voice in my head whispered, "You know, don't you, Caleb? The final course," Eli said, "will change the way you see cuisine forever." What I didn't know yet was that it would also change me. I stared at the small bone resting in the center of the silver plate like it was an artifact dug up from a graveyard. No worse than that. It was thinner, lighter, too perfect. It looked like it belonged to something that was never meant to be cooked. "You don't have to eat it if you don't want to," Eli said, his voice calm and weightless. "But if you want to truly know, then this is the door." I set the spoon down. My hand trembled slightly. "What bone is this?" I asked, my throat dry as sand. Eli didn't answer right away. He straightened his posture, crossed his arms, and watched me, as if waiting for something inside me to shift. "Have you ever heard the phrase, 'Cuisine is evolutionary instinct'?" he asked. "It starts with plants, then animals, then placenta, then blood, and eventually, we arrive at ourselves." It felt like someone had punched me straight in the gut. "You're joking," I rasped, ... Eli shook his head, eyes locked on mine. "You know better than anyone, Caleb. You tasted it in the very first dish. That flavor didn't come from beef, veal, or any animal you've ever encountered. That was the taste of human memory." I jumped to my feet, the chair crashing behind me. A few diners turned their heads, not surprised, not panicked, just annoyed, as if their meal had been interrupted. "I'm leaving," I said, breath catching. Eli didn't try to stop me. He simply said, "If you leave now, that taste will never leave your mind. But if you stay, you'll understand, and you'll never have to search again." I backed away, bumping into a table behind me. My hand instinctively wiped the sweat from my brow, and that's when I noticed I was shaking. Every dish came rushing back in vivid clarity, the flavor too perfect, too real, too familiar, like something buried in me had been forcefully brought to the surface. "What about the others?" I asked, scanning the room. "Do they know?" Eli smiled. "They were all like you once, curious, hungry, invited, and now they can't leave." That's when I saw the kitchen door slightly ajar behind him. A wisp of smoke curled out, along with the scent of freshly roasted meat. But there was something else underneath the metallic stench of blood, the unmistakable burn of hair. I moved past Eli without asking, without hesitation. The door creaked gently as I pushed it open. The kitchen wasn't large, but meticulously organized. Knives lined the walls by size. The cast-iron oven glowed red-hot. A pot of bones bubbled violently on the stove, and in the corner, a stainless steel butcher table. Lying on it was a partially processed body. The limbs had been deboned. The back was exposed, crochetted with razor-sharp incisions, filleted like a side of salmon. I gagged. My throat tightened. Eli entered behind me, unhurried. He was a chef, he said softly, just like you, but he refused the final course. So he became it. I backed away. Every part of me felt frozen. Don't you see? Eli continued, his voice disturbingly calm. This isn't just a restaurant. It's a rite of passage. Those who can taste and serve stay. Those who can't, feed the next. I murmured, you're a cult. No, Caleb, Eli whispered. We're chefs. But no culinary school in the world teaches this dish. Outside, I heard the rhythmic tapping of a knife against a cutting board. The restaurant door slammed shut. The trap had closed. And I was now inside its stomach. I don't remember how many things I knocked over as I bolted out of that kitchen. Everything felt warped: lights, smoke, the rhythm of knives hitting cutting boards. It all mocked me. The front door was locked, the back deadbolted from the inside. I felt like a marinated cut of meat just waiting for the oven to preheat. You can't run forever. Eli's voice echoed not loud, but clear, as if it were coming from inside my own skull. You tasted it, and now it's tasted you. I looked around frantically, then spotted an air vent near the ceiling behind the roasting oven. I didn't think. I lunged toward it, burning my hands on the hot metal frame. I slammed my elbow into it until it gave way, wriggling through the narrow opening like a cornered animal. Outside was a narrow alley. The stench of garbage, raw meat, and smoke fused into something revolting, but I didn't stop. I ran. My shoes slipped across the damp ground, but I didn't care. I ran from that street, from the name Marrow Pit, from Eli and that smile branded into the back of my brain. I don't remember how I got home. I only know that I woke up the next morning in my bathtub clothes torn, limbs scraped, and the smell still clinging to my skin. The scent of seared meat, boiled bone, cooled blood. I vomited, not because of alcohol, because of memory. The police were useless. There was no record of 120 Wexley Avenue in the city's registry. When I returned 2 days later, all that remained was a vacant lotishes and broken bricks. No trace. No one had heard of the Marrow Pit. No one knew the name Eli Warden. But I knew, and worse, I remembered the taste. I tried everything. Going vegan, fasting, staying out of the kitchen entirely. But on rainy nights, when the smoker in the restaurant, where I now work, starts to warm up, my hands tremble. I close my eyes, and I can almost taste it again. That umami, that flavor no human should ever know. I'm still alive, but I'm not free. Because when someone asks me, what's the best thing you've ever eaten? I always want to answer. I'm not allowed to say, and you really shouldn't ask.